Hi everyone, it's Hossein Mokhtarzadeh here, and it's my great pleasure to have Dr. Kane Middleton with us today. Thank you very much for being with us. Your work bridges elite sport, technology, biomechanics in really fascinating ways. I'd love to explore some of these, shortly too, of course. How, for instance, you have been collaborating with some big teams like the Boston Red Sox, that actually reminds myself as well, because I used to be there for like 2, 3 years, just across the road. What that means for like performance science. It's an amazing experience. Yeah, you're still dealing with that, or?
Uh, my work with the Red Sox has finished for the moment. They took a different direction in
Of
terms of
course.
their biomechanics support, so they brought in well, they actually did a full almost restructure and reshuffle of all their sports science department. So my role when I was there, I was for a short period of time a consultant. So I was actually on some panels when they were looking to hire some people in biomechanics and skill acquisition. But the research that I did with them was more in relation to technology, um, checking different technologies and whether they could be used within. Yeah, just cold calling with different technologies all the time. So it was some of the bigger ones that they had purchased that they were keen to have me and my team. I would say validate them because that kind of comes very positively that they can be validated, but checking whether new technologies, the agreement between new technologies and some of the newer technologies that were coming on the market. So most of it was related to comparing new technology with market motion capture. And it expanded from markerless motion capture. There was a few of those that we looked at and a few wearable systems as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're doing quite a lot in terms of biomechanics in different industries, even defense, sport, like elite sport. So is the technology really something that you just go for it, or is it like more of okay, what is the actual problem, or we can resolve, and then we go pick up the relevant technology.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both. My
Mm,
the experience going back to the Red Sox was more because I guess it comes down to how many resources and funding they
of
have.
course.
So Major League Baseball teams aren't really short of funds. So what they will do is if they have an inkling that some piece of technology could be useful, they might purchase that and then hopefully they'll do some internal testing to see that if it's useful for their purposes. Whereas some of the smaller um, teams or sport where they have having the question and then trying to find the right technology to fit the problem that they've got. So I think there's a bit of both. I quite like the idea of sports when they have an issue, they want to look at the main problem that they have and work out the best technology for that. And if they can do their own internal testing or getting some research and collaborating with people in academia to help them work out whether it's useful or not, then I think that's the way to go. So an example of that, I've got a PhD student, Jeff Fleming, who we're doing a collaborative project with Cricket Victoria, which is a big passion of mine in the sports aspect. Cricket is what I did my PhD in, and I've been researching that for quite a while now. Um, but workload within cricket is difficult to quantify. So in lots of running based sports, so Australian football, for instance, workload or load is effectively the running. So acceleration, decelerations, high speed efforts. Cricket's very different. You've got some small acceleration from bowlers. You have them running in, got them and pretty hard forces, then bowling crease. Um, then you've got the fielding aspect as well. So we're trying to look at whether different wearable technologies can um, can give us an idea about the loads on the bowler from different aspects. And we're using a multi-instrumental approach, I could call it. So we've got instrumented insoles to look at trying to get ground action forces in the field, because that's obviously one of the big things, is not being constrained to the lab. So instrumented insoles, tibial IMUs, an IMU at the sacrum, an IMU at the trunk, an IMU on their wrist as well. I'm trying to get some markerless motion capture as well to see if that's the next step in between being in the lab and then out in the field. So our hypothesis is that workload within cricket bowling is quite different depending on what part of the action, the bowling action, you're looking at. So it's not just how far they run or how much they've accelerated. So that's where Cricket Victoria has been quite interested in trying to figure out what can they use to quantify load, and we're trying to help them do that, explore it a bit more than just relying on don't want to pick out a particular company, but they do use Catapult and they use player load.
Yep. Yep.
So that's part of our testing as well, whether that can be useful in, or trying to determine where that can be useful in terms of what is it quantifying, rather than just a holistic number of workload, right, which doesn't really make sense, particularly in cricket bowling, which is so there's different aspects of it.
That's right. Oh, actually, when I'm listening to you, it was amazing. Yeah. First of all, yeah, it's amazing that you guys, even like in broader sense in Latrobe and some of these universities, you just go really work with sporting bodies, or like teams, and like big teams, and which is amazing. But I still see a lot of gaps. That for instance, let's say, from my own background, like we know that ACL injury happens a lot, even in not necessarily in elite level, in all levels, right? And some of these, like for coaches, or even like small clubs and things like that, they may or may not know that people like you exist that can help them. What do you do for that? From the technology point of view, you guys are leading and trying to find the best out there and helping the best, in elite sport. But there are lots of levels, different levels, right? Of a sport, of sporting activities, or people who involve in those activities, and injuries are there. And of course, performance also are there. So how do you reconcile these things, or how can we really help? Is it like just academia problem or industry problem? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's a good question, a good point, because I think it's a problem with everyone. Everyone's probably has a little bit to blame in why we can't start to make some inroads. So from our perspective, I don't think sports science has been really good in terms of probably commercializing, developing systems, and then implementing. It's largely been industry led. And you can't blame companies, for-profit companies,
Of course,
because they want to produce a tool that's going to make money, and that's not a problem at all. Some people complain that certain metrics are black box and it's not transparent, but in my opinion, they're businesses that are there to make a profit. As long as they're not putting anyone at risk or in danger, there's no issues with that. So there is that aspect of potentially the sports science area in particular not producing enough and be able to, I don't think we do really well in commercialization, and I think there's a big push at the moment within universities to do that. But we also, and I'm speaking generally for sports scientists, we're not developers of technology really either. So there's probably a lack of collaboration with engineers, software engineers, electrical engineers to develop potential sensors or motion capture systems, like data scientists to look at markerless MoCap as well, and different algorithms using machine learning or AI. There can be better collaboration, but that also requires funding as well. So being smart in how we can attract funding to develop those things. But then on the other end, I think what's been continually shown, particularly around ACL injury, is that neuromuscular training programs can be quite good at reducing ACL injury risk, but the implementation and the uptake isn't probably as high as we would like as researchers. And from experience working, having athletes come through the lab, I think one thing that I continually see or get this, at least get the sense, is that if it's a prevention program, athletes don't tend to buy into it because there's probably a bit of a thought that's not going to happen to me.
Okay.
Why am I going to spend on doing this if it's not something that's going to have immediate effects? Because an injury doesn't occur until it actually happens. So players and athletes won't see that. Whereas probably more buy-in from, say, a performance aspect, if you can say, well, you can see immediate changes in your performance, there's probably a bit more buy-in. So whether that can be used in a way when designing programs that can have a injury risk reduction aspect, but then also a performance aspect as well to get their buy-in. That might be one way to do it. So I think, yeah, there's a bit of blame with everyone in the
Of
whole
course.
process.
Of course.
And I hope, yeah, that I know implementation science is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
So hopefully we'll start to see some bigger changes in
Bigger
the near future.
No, that's amazing. I think you point out really the thing that we see, even when I've been in industry, and I could see that, people are focusing a lot on like, oh, preventing injuries or helping someone recover and things like that. Yeah, there's a push, but there is like no one really properly sees the actual person, like athletes or, a person who is going through the rehabilitation, even with or without an injury, So there's a lot of like a psychology there that happens, or
Yeah.
maybe resistant going there. But another thing that came to my mind, it's actually cool that you mentioned we don't do, or you guys don't do much like commercialization, or universities are not doing. So imagine, so you got everything, right? So given you have big background in terms of cricket or your interest, so whatever you want, we can give you. What would you do to solve?
Another good question. I think that's also a difficult one because I'm under no illusion that even if we had all the technology in the world and unlimited resources to do it, there's still a lot to do to look at cause effect relationships. We still don't know. It's still really hard. You can't predict an injury. You can only really reduce the risk. So I don't want to say that even with all the resources in the world, we'll be able to prevent injuries from happening. Even though there are these tools and devices in the market at the moment, there has to be some healthy skepticism around what they can and can't do. So that's one of the big things I'll preface anything with. I think that's a big thing. To try and give you an answer to your question, I think it would be some kind of multi-platform type approach. So it also is context dependent as well. And you've mentioned defense, and yeah, I've done work in defense. One thing where what doesn't work in defense in terms of in the field measurement is markerless motion capture because they're covering such broad areas. If you're trying to get something in the field, that's just not feasible. So in that context, something like a wearable device is going to be better. Whereas if you've got something that's more constrained, whether it's a basketball court or a gym, then markerless motion capture becomes something that is much more viable to be able to get some movement data. So context is one thing. So I don't think there's one full answer in terms of we would do this. It's very much dependent on the context. So I think markerless motion capture is definitely the future for some aspects in some contexts, whereas wearables is the answer, I think, for other contexts. And I think there is a context where a combination of both would actually give some really rich information as well. I believe there's some work in the US that started to look at using instrumented insoles to get force measurement and then markerless motion capture to get kinematics and merging those together to try and get an estimate of or use inverse dynamics to get joint torques or kinetics. So I think that's one area where a multi-platform solution is probably something that will develop and get better in the future. So I don't know if I completely answered your question there,
No,
but
that's all good.
it is very much context
Yeah,
dependent in
of
what
course.
the best solution would be.
No, of course. It's what I read from what you mentioned. It's amazing. I totally agree that it depends on the context, depends on what your problem you're solving, and but what I see is you see it as a really complex and multifactorial issue. Even if we just focus on sports science, part of it, it's huge from the commercial part you mentioned, from the research part, and really it's a hand in hand. You can't just I go and build something, even black box, and I say, oh, I can predict something or I can actually prevent something. But if we don't necessarily put it into the context and properly validate it, put it into test, you can. And that's why my question, the first question was that, how can we actually merge these? I see like when I talk to friends come to me say, oh, I got like my ACL injury during this sport or that sport, and say, what did you do? And they tell me, and I say that, oh, I see that it's very simple. Maybe 10 minutes education could have stopped that.
Yeah,
Literally 10 minutes education or less than that. Say, don't do this to your joint. You don't lock it this way or that way. You know what I mean? So it's not
yeah.
always this type of solutions. Yep.
Exactly. It's a really good point because it's not all about technology. It's about people who have the expertise in order to be able to do that. So your example there was the education component. Another one is even if you do have all these outputs from these different technologies, do you have someone who could then interpret that data and
Exactly.
make it actionable? So there's never going to be a time where a single piece of technology is going to solve everything. There's
Solve
still
everything.
that knowledge part, the interpretation, the implementation part, which requires expertise.
Exactly, exactly. But I do appreciate it. I have lots of questions, but we try to keep it as short as possible. This type of interviews. What would you like, yeah, or you wanted me to ask you, but I didn't wanted to share with everyone from your background, from the things that you're doing or the
Um,
messages.
I think I've said most of the things I like to get across.
Awesome.
There is maybe I'll just follow up with the expertise thing. Is that my personal viewpoint is maybe some of the silos that exist in sports science don't allow that full collaborative approach to problems. And again, that uh, understanding what technology is telling us and getting through all the useless data that might be there because we collect so much now, being able to then interpret that, but then also having that the human who can help implement, and that might not be the same person. So for a while now, I've been very much on board in terms of and because I'm a biomechanist, I'll stick with the biomechanics aspect. A biomechanist, if they're in a institute or a team working with a skill development person who can help make the changes that they're suggesting. So a much more collaborative approach and being, I know that the newer term is data informed rather than data driven. So using the data the right way, um, understanding what the usefulness of that data and which parts you can just ignore because they are not very helpful, and then taking those forward and trying to make changes.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I do appreciate that, Kane. It was great insights. I'm sure we can keep talking about different aspects of biomechanics as well. We both love, and we can talk a lot about different aspects of it and how we can implement it. What I read and understand from you is maybe one key word is like collaboration is key here, and just really talking to each other and trying to fill the gaps in the whole. Because it's not just even we say biomechanics is from cell all the way to a full human musculoskeletal system and beyond to animals and everything. So it's a huge area, and specifically for sports science, there's a lot to do. It's not just like we have technology, so we solved everything. Thank you very much, Dr. Middleton, Associate Professor from Trobe University. I really enjoyed that, and hopefully we can keep chatting in the future.
Of course, thank you.